Namaste, I'm Shruti. I will be your guide for this online course on the evolution of Panchayati Raj system in India. In the previous modules, we discussed about the historical evolution of Panchayat Raj system in India during pre and post independence. Today we are going to learn about the salient features of 73rd Amendment Act. Visualizing the need for a more realistic, decentralized local governance, Government of India initiated constitutional amendment in 1989. The objectives of the constitutional amendment stated that though the PRIs have been in existence for a long time, they have not been able to acquire the status of responsive people's bodies due to a number of reasons, including absence of regular elections, prolonged suppression, insufficient representation of weaker sections like SCs, STs, and women, inadequate devolution of powers, and lack of financial resource. Our bill will ensure that Panchayati Raj has a democratic character similar to the Lok Sabha and the state assemblies and constitutional protection for their functioning as representative institutions of the people. Prime Minister Shri Rajiv Gandhi. Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao introduced the 72nd and the 73rd Constitution Amendment Bills based on the bills moved earlier. The Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha passed both the bills on the 22nd and 23rd December 1992 respectively. By the time the Parliament passed the two bills, their sequence changed to 73rd and 74th respectively. Following their ratification by more than half of the state assemblies, President of India gave his assent and the acts came into force as the Constitution 73rd Amendment Act on April 24th, 1993 and the Constitution 74th Amendment Act on June 1st, 1993. Through this amendment, Part 9, the Panchayats, and the Part 9A, the municipalities, was added to the Constitution respectively. Let us know about the most important features of the 73rd Amendment Act 1992. The key features of 73rd Constitutional Amendment fall under two categories: mandatory provisions and discretionary provisions. Now, we are going to look at these provisions. First one is mandatory provisions. 3 tiers of panchayats, 2 tiers in states with less than 20 lakh population, territorial constituencies for all panchayats, elections to panchayats every 5 years by the State Election Commission, direct elections to all seats in all levels of panchayats, indirect elections for block and district panchayat presidents, reservations for SCs, STs in proportion to population, and 1/3 reservation for women at all levels. Constitution of Gram Sabha, State Finance Commission every 5 years to allocate grants, taxes to Panchayat Raj institutions. These are the mandatory provisions of 73rd Amendment Act. Now, we will move on to the discretionary provisions for state. States given certain discretion to have its own policy like powers, capacity and structure of panchayats. We will go one by one. Powers of panchayats. Devolution of 3 Fs: finance, functions and functionaries to Panchayat Raj institutions in 29 subjects listed Schedule 11. Powers of Gram Sabha. Capacity of panchayats. Provision of staff, training, infrastructure to panchayats. Structure of panchayats. Reservation for backward classes. Extent of reservation for women. Direct or indirect election of Gram Panchayat presidents. Empowerment of different levels of panchayats which tier of panchayats is most important? Size of gram panchayats. Rules for panchayat processes such as planning, accounting and audit. After the provisions, we just look into the list of 29 subjects included under Article 243G for the 11th schedule. Agriculture including agricultural extension, land improvement, implementation of land reforms, land consolidation and soil conservation, minor irrigation, water management and watershed development, animal husbandry, dairying and poultry, fisheries, social forestry and farm forestry, minor forest produce, small-scale industries including food processing industries, khadi, village and cottage industries, rural housing, drinking water, fuel and fodder, roads, culverts, bridges, ferries, waterways and other means of communication, rural electrification including distribution of electricity, non-conventional energy sources, poverty alleviation program, education including primary and secondary schools, technical training and vocational education, adult and non-formal education, libraries, cultural activities, markets and fairs, health and sanitation including hospitals, primary health centers and dispensaries, family welfare, women and child development, social welfare including welfare of the handicapped and mentally retarded, welfare of the weaker sections and in particular of the SCs and STs, public distribution system, maintenance of community assets. After the list of 29 subjects included under Article 243G of the 11th schedule, now we will see the local governance in the tribal areas. Local governance in the tribal areas. Article 244 of the Constitution envisages three categories of tribal areas, namely, areas notified as scheduled areas in the specified states, 5th schedule, areas listed as tribal areas in the 6th schedule in northeastern region, areas not covered in the above two categories. So the Government of India enacted Panchayats Extension to Scheduled Areas Act, PESA 1996 to extend 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act to tribal areas with certain exceptions. PESA empowers Gram Sabha to preserve tradition, cultural and identity, to manage community property resources, to approve plans, schemes, identify beneficiaries, to control minor minerals, forest produce and money lending, and to prevent alienation of tribal land. According to the 6th schedule, there are several states. They evolve their own functions. Governance in tribal areas, 6th schedule areas. 4 states inhabited by tribes also exempted from the provisions of 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act. Each areas is governed by the autonomous district councils and village council. These councils are endowed with legislative, judicial and executive powers. Virtually, they function as a state within state. So, after we know about 73rd Amendment Act, now we will see what is the present scenario. At present, there are about 3 million elected representatives at all levels of panchayat. 1/3 are women. These members represent more than 2.4 lakh gram panchayats, about 6,000 intermediate level tiers and more than 500 district panchayats spread over the length and breadth of the country. A separate Ministry of Panchayati Raj MOPR was created in May 2004 with a vision to attain decentralized and participatory local self-governments through Panchayati Raj institutions. Ministry of Panchayati Raj seeks to fulfill its mandate by providing funds through its schemes for key activities, creating and supporting the creation of knowledge about Panchayati Raj to articulate issues more clearly and to formulate effective strategies to strengthen Panchayati Raj, creating a platform for advocacy and sharing strategies to strengthen panchayats. Let's summarize the entire module of this evolution of Panchayat Raj system in India. The perspective of Panchayati Raj institutions in the state of India was substantially changed by the 73rd Constitution Amendment Act 1992, which came into force with effect from April 24, 1993. This amendment of the Constitution sought to give some uniformity to Panchayati Raj institutions throughout the country by providing uniform guidelines and directives. Now we will take a test. What we learned from this module. For this test, we have prepared a quiz. Are you ready to answer the questions of this quiz? Let us test our understanding in the form of multiple choice questions. Click on the next button to begin.